Good evening. I am Resat Kasaba. I am the director of the Jackson School of International Studies, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's discussion. Here at the Jackson School, when we thought about themes that are important for us to think about and to discuss in these coming years to understand what's going on in the world, China, of course, always comes up the top of the list. So we are very pleased that we have a very distinguished group of speakers this evening, to discuss various aspects of U.S.-China relations. As the director of the Henry M. Jackson School of International Studies, I am pleased to be one of the hosts of this evening's program. The other hosts are Jackson Foundation and National Bureau for Research. We are grateful to them for their cooperation and for making this evening possible. I am going to now call Michael Wills, who is the Vice President for Research and Operations at National Bureau of Research, who will speak a little bit about the NBR and also will give you some background about the panel this evening. Michael.
Well, thank you, Resat, for that kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, a pleasure to be working with the Jackson School and the Jackson Foundation on this event. The National Bureau of Asian Research was established 20 years ago. It actually grew out of the University of Washington. It's a non-profit, non-partisan think tank that exists to inform and strengthen policy. And the way we accomplish that mission is by trying to bridge the gap between expertise that exists in the scholarly community and bringing it to the attention of policymakers in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere so that they can make better informed decisions. In many ways, NBR, the National Bureau of Asian Research, was set up to fulfill the vision of Senator Henry M. Jackson from Washington State. In his career, Senator Jackson made use of scholars to inform him as he traveled around Asia. One of those scholars is sitting here in the audience tonight, several others elsewhere across the United States. But Kenneth Pyle, who's professor of History and Asian Studies here at NBR, at the University of Washington, and was NBR's founding president, accompanied Senator Jackson on many of his trips. And one of the things Professor Pyle has said about Senator Jackson was he had extraordinary appreciation of the importance that history and culture played in shaping countries that the United States needed to deal with as it was crafting an effective foreign policy. That's the mission that NBR exists to fulfill. We're delighted to have a couple of scholars here with us this evening and someone from the policy community in Washington, D.C., all of whom flew in this morning to join us. I'm not going to introduce them, but I will introduce one person, and that's John Hempelmann sitting at the end of the table here. John is the president of the Henry M. Jackson Foundation. He personally worked with Senator Jackson for 15 years in the 1960s and 70s. He has been on the Jackson Foundation board for more than a decade, president for the past 2 years, has a law degree from the University of Washington, and is a very successful and distinguished lawyer here in Seattle. And he is going to be moderating this evening's discussion and introducing our panelists. I'd like to invite him to come up to the stage now.
Thank you, Resat and Michael. And the Henry M. Jackson Foundation is very pleased to be joining with the Jackson School and the National Bureau of Asian Research in sponsoring this very, very interesting program tonight. I can say that with a well-informed opinion because I've had the privilege of spending the last 3.5 hours with our panelists and a bunch of other folks talking about the issues that you're going to hear talking to you about tonight. So this will be a very stimulating evening for you, I can assure you. A lot of you probably do not remember Scoop Jackson. He was our U.S. Senator from Washington from 1952 until to 1983. A very, very influential politician. And there are not a lot of members of the U.S. Congress who have been gone as long as Scoop and still have very, very active foundations continuing to promote their legacy. And I'm very, very pleased that the Senator's legacy is considered very important, not just at the University of Washington and across the street at the National Bureau of Asian Research. But when I go back to Washington, D.C., and I tell people that I'm with the Jackson Foundation or that I worked for Scoop Jackson, I get an immediate recognition, because this is a man whose qualities of political leadership are still widely admired around the world. There's a very active Henry M. Jackson Society that operates out of the House of Parliament in London. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the senator. He was a visionary. He was one of the first members of Congress who understood the strategic relationship and the potential of the relationship between the United States and China, when China was still very much an evolving economy and evolving power. Of course, we're well beyond that point now. And so that's why we're here. The senator, highly valued, as Michael said, highly valued economic, political, and cultural input from the academic community. He wanted to have governmental officials have access to ideas and policy formation outside of the government. And he reached out to places like the University of Washington and my friend Ken Pyle, Professor Pyle, and others around the country to get his information. So what you're going to see tonight is typical of what Scoop wanted to see. And that's why we're happy to be part of it. I don't need to tell you how important the relationship is between China and the United States. Maybe it's enough to say they are the first and second largest economies in the world. You'll hear a lot of numbers tonight. You know some of the incredibly pressing issues that are on the table about our relationship with China. And I think it's pretty incredible, is it not, that here we are tonight talking about the economic relationship between these two superpowers when G8 is convening tomorrow in Korea, and those very same subjects are going to be on the table discussed by President Obama and the leaders of the Asian economies. So you're going to get a briefing tonight in advance of what you might read about or see on the television tomorrow. That's cool. I'm going to tell you about all three speakers, and then we'll have them speak one at a time. Our first speaker is Dr. Thomas Roski. Let me tell you, a very, very distinguished academician. He has taught economics and history at the University of Pittsburgh for more than 20 years, and before that he taught at the University of Toronto for 14 years. He is a research associate in the new National Asia Research Program that the National Bureau of Asian Research is organizing with the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. He has written extensively on the nature and implications of the long-term changes in China's economy. And when I say extensively, think about your curriculum vitae. When I asked for Tom's, it came up on my screen at the office. I saw page 1 of 17. And it was fascinating looking at everything. I didn't look at it all, but even scan what he has written over his career. Really, really exciting. Our second speaker will be Professor Min-Shin Pei. Min-Shin is a professor of government. He's the director of the Keck Center for International and Strategic Studies at Claremont McKenna College in California. Prior to that time, Min-Shin really was one of the most sought-after China experts inside the Beltway. He was senior associate at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and he still serves there as an adjunct senior fellow. Like Tom, he is a research associate in the new National Asia Research Program, the NBR program with the Woodrow Wilson Center. Min-Shin's research focuses on democratization, economic reform, and governance in China and U.S.-China relations. And he'll have some fascinating things to tell you, because I was fascinated by what I heard this afternoon. Our final speaker will be Mr. David Levenger. David is the United States Department of Treasury Senior Coordinator and Executive Secretary for China Affairs. He also runs the U.S.-China Strategic and Economic Dialogue, which includes the State Department and other governmental agencies. In this role, David leads the U.S. government's negotiation with China on the economic track of the dialogue, and right at ground zero in terms of China economic policy. Prior to being in the Treasury position he's in now, he was the U.S. Minister and Counselor for Financial Affairs to China, was responsible for deepening the U.S.-China engagement on financial and macroeconomic issues, including exchange rate policies. Some of you may have that topic on your mind tonight. He also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Africa, Middle East, and Asia at the Treasury Department, and has led the efforts to encourage the large Asian economies to adopt more flexible exchange rates. So each of our speakers are going to speak about 15, 20 minutes. You will not want them to stop. I'll get up here after 20 minutes and put the hook on them so that there'll be some time for questions afterwards. So let's start out with Tom.